Hello and welcome to the session. So let's continue our discussion on advanced Java object-oriented programming topic. So we have this topic called as inheritance. It is one of the very basic and starting topic and bit easy to understand. So before starting the theoretical part, let's understand with these images. So let's quickly have a look at these images. So if you see in these images, this basically there's a wheel image, and if you see these are the other objects which are basically reutilizing the wheel in their own way. So this is basically called as inheritance or basically reusability. So this wheel concept is being reutilized in a different manner in different ways, different objects. So what is inheritance? It is a mechanism in which one class acquires properties of another class. So what are the properties? Data variables and methods. So in other words, it is called as reusability. So same example of wheels. So wheel concept is reutilized in different ways. Using inheritance, a lot of reinventing efforts are saved. One and the same thing. So if some method or some algorithm or some kind of a process is already implemented in other class, I can ready-made reutilize that in my class using inheritance. So that is reusability. Now different people use different terminologies for this. So parent class, super class or base class is the one who is being reused. Child class, subclass or derived class is the one who acquires the properties. So I will be using parent child concept most of the time, but you can use any of this concept. Now how to extend the parent class into the child class? This can be done using extends keyword. Now let us see some syntax and some of the examples. So I have this class called as basic model, which has certain attributes and which has these two methods already implemented. So if I want to design a car, which where obviously I would want this functionality to already have it. So what I can do is I can say car, this is my current class, extends the parent class called as basic model. So when I say extends basic model, that means whatever is available here in the base class, that is available to reuse in my class or in the child class. So if you see here, I have created an object of the car class, right? And I have directly started accessing the variables and calling the methods which is there in this basic model class. So I am inheriting that, I am reusing that. That is called as inheritance. Let's see another example. So parent child, easy to understand. So parent class has some of the attributes and the method called as, let's say, communication skills. And child class, so child class with the object of child class, so child extends parent. So with the object of child class, I can start accessing the attributes and methods which are there in the parent class. Now let us see another example. Base class. So base class has, let's say, employee ID, location and salary processing, uh, some uh, some specific way to process a salary of employees. And so derived class extends the base class, and using the object of the derived class, I can access the attributes and I can call the process from the parent class. Let's just run it once. Okay, so this is inheritance. In a nutshell, this is inheritance. Okay, so there can be tricky question in an interview. So let's see. So can base class can have main method? Okay, interesting question. So now this is your base class and this is your derived class. So normally the case is in the derived class, you extend the base class and you start using whatever is available in the base class. Now question here is, can I have main method in the base class itself? So let's just uncomment this and see what happens. Okay, so as you can see, there is no compilation error. You can still go ahead and run the base class. Let me just right click, and if you see, run base class, and if I right click here, run derived class. So I can run both the classes. Now if you see here, the base class has main method and derived class has main method. So there is a kind of a duplication, or there's a confusion that which class to run and why to run. So very normal case or the obvious case is whenever you are extending something from another class, you would want to run whatever is there in your class. Okay, so you would want here to use the derived class instead of base class. Of course, if you have a specific requirement to run the base class, you can run the base class anyway. But here the normal case or the logical sense, it logically speaking, it makes sense to have a main method in the derived class. Okay, so let's just run it and see what happens. I am running the derived class. Okay, so no change. It has printed employee ID, location, and process the salary. So irrespective of main method is there or not in the base class, you can run the derived class. Also, there is no harm in having a main method in the base class, but it is logically not a correct thing to do. Okay, so let me just comment it. Okay, when child class is instantiated, then is parent class also instantiated? Interesting question. Now if you see, let's see the derived class example once again. Now if you see, I'm creating an instance of the derived class. So the question here is, when I create an object of the derived class, will there be an instance of the base class automatically get created? So answer is no. If you see explicitly, I have mentioned here new and derived class. This means that I have created an object of the derived class, but I have not created of an object of the base class. However, by doing extends keyword, by doing inheritance, I can access the variables and the methods in the child class. So this is correct. So the answer to the question is no. So there are a couple of types of inheritance. So this we have seen parent and child. There's something called as hierarchical inheritance. So one parent can be extended by multiple childs, correct? And multi-level inheritance. So you have grandparent, which is extended into parent, and parent, which is extended into child. So obviously, whatever is there in the grandparent will be available in the parent, and whatever is there in the grandparent and parent will be available in the child class. So this is multi-level inheritance. Let's see with an example. So we have an employee class. Employee class has a method called as get employee ID, and let us see process attendance. So process attendance class extends employee, and in the employee class, what is the method? Get employee ID. So it is calling the get employee ID method, and it is doing further processing for attendance. Let's say insurance. So insurance also has to be processed for an employee. So I need to have employee ID from the base class. Okay, and I am doing calculate insurance premium and so on. Similarly, salary processing. So in this example also similar thing. So the point here is, this is basically hierarchical inheritance. This we have seen already. Now we are saying hierarchical inheritance. So employee class is being extended into multiple child classes. Now what is multi-level inheritance? Let us see. So I have this grandparent class which has only one method, let's say greet me, and I have parent class which extends grandparent class. Parent extends grandparent. So parent class has a additional method called as advise me. So in the parent class, if you see, you have a main method, and you create an object of the parent class right hand side. Now you can call the method from the parent, you can call the method from the current class, you can call the method from the grandparent, and also from the parent. So let's just run it. So it will be calling greet me and advise me, right? So hello world is coming from grandparent. If you see hello world here, and parental advice is coming from the parent class. Okay. Now this is simple to understand. Now let us see child. So child has a method called as play with me. So child extends parent. So obviously parent also extends grandparent. So whatever is there in the parent, whatever is there in the grandparent is available in the child class. So on top of that, child class has this additional method. So if you see here, I have created an object of the child class, right hand side, and I can start calling the method from grandparent, from parent, and from current class. So this is basically multi-level inheritance, right? Hello world, parental advice, and play with me. Okay, so let us see another interesting topic called as constructor. What is a constructor? It is a special method. The name of this method is same as the class name, which is used to initialize a newly created object. Okay, let's see with an example. Okay, so if you see, this is a class called as car, and this is how you implement a constructor. So you have the method name. So what is a constructor? It is a method whose name is exactly same as your class name, and you have the body. Okay, so I have this car, uh, empty constructor, parameterized constructor, and so on. Now the question could be like, why do we need a constructor? So let's try to understand with an example. So let's say there is no constructor. So you have a class, let's say car, and you create an object, and then your class has, let's say, a couple of instance variable. So I have how many? 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's say there are 6 variable. But in real time, there in real life there can be hundreds of variables in a class. Now, whenever you create an object of the class, right, the right hand side, now you start assigning the values to the required variables, or let's say all the variables. Now similarly, you create an object, and you start assigning the values to the variables, to the instance variable. Now let's say this process is there for n number of times, and you want to initialize lot of variables. So this is basically eating your space of your code, and this also may not look that much aesthetically correct. So what you do, you declare a method which will initialize this variable at the same time when the object is created, and that is called as constructor. So it is a special method which is used to initialize a newly created object. It is called just after the memory is allocated for the object, when new keyword object with the new keyword. For example, whenever you say car c new car, at that time only the constructor will be called. Whenever you use a new keyword, that time the constructor will be called. Okay, so in this case, this is basically an empty constructor or no argument constructor. So let us see uh, how the constructor is solving to reduce this particular space. Okay, so this number of lines, how we can reduce, and there are some additional benefits also. So if you see, I have designed a constructor here. This is basically called as empty constructor. This is basically called as parameterized constructor. So empty constructor meaning that there is no argument, no arguments are passed, and the body is also empty, so it's basically empty. Now this is called as parameterized constructor, where you can pass certain parameters, and there is some content into the body of the constructor. Remember, constructor is just another method. Only difference is the constructor method will be called immediately when you create an object. Okay. So now in this case, this is basically calling this empty constructor. It is creating an object, and it is immediately calling the empty constructor. Now let us see this example. Car C3 equal to new car, and now you see I am passing those parameter when I have created the object itself. Okay, so now you see these all lines of codes will be reduced to only one line, except that I am passing number of parameters here. So when I create an object using this way, what happens is the JVM will actually invoke this method, this constructor called as parameterized constructor. It will try to match the number of parameters here. Let's say there are 6 parameters. So here also it will match the 6 parameters, and it will invoke this method. It will get the work done, and it will return C3 variable. Similarly C4. So now you see the space required to initialize those variable is saved. Okay. Okay. Now there are different types of constructor. So a constructor, it can be used to initialize the objects to desired values or default values at the time of object creation. This is important, at the time of object creation. It does not return anything or no return statement. So what is meant by that? Okay, so as I said, constructor is just another method. So if you have any method, your return type has to be mentioned. If it returns nothing, you have to mention void. But if you see here, I have not mentioned like public void or public int or anything. So there is no access modifier here, and there is no return type, explicit return type mentioned. So for a constructor, it is by a rule that if you no need to have a return statement, and you no need to have return type explicitly mentioned, because constructor is a method which you cannot call explicitly. It will be called when you create an object using new keyword. Whenever you say new something, that time the compiler or the JVM will try to match the number of arguments with this, and it will automatically call this constructor. Okay, so constructor is not called explicitly, it will be called implicitly by JVM. Okay, it does not return anything, no return statement. So there are different types of constructor: default constructor, empty constructor, parameterized constructor. Let's see that with an example. So employee class. So employee class is here. Okay, this is the simple way to create an object of the employee class. Now default constructor. Now if you see in this example, everything is commented. Okay, now whenever you create an object of this employee class and there is no constructor defined here. Okay, so what is happening here is, this is basically, whenever you say creating an object, you create an object and the JVM will actually called a default constructor anyway, or a default constructor code will be inserted into your class file, which does nothing. There it is empty basically. If you see default constructor, there's nothing here. Okay, so default constructor will anyway get called, but it does nothing. Now let's see an example. Default constructor. Now this is basically no argument empty body constructor. So it is kind of a default constructor only, but you are explicitly mentioning this constructor, explicitly writing the code for this constructor. Now what about this one? So this is slightly different than this. So this is a no argument constructor, but non-empty body constructor. So there is some body, but there is no argument here. Here there is no argument, there is no body. Here at least there is some body. So what happens is, whenever you create an object of the employee class and this no argument non-empty body constructor is mentioned, is available, right? Whenever you create an object, so this will be called and it will print this statement body. Let's run it. Okay, so main method starts, it is calling a constructor. If you see, the constructor available is this one, though it is a no argument constructor, but it is body is not empty, so it is saying body, and it is saying main method ends. Now this is one type of constructor. This is called as a parameterized constructor. So as we have seen in the earlier example, this is called as parameterized constructor. Now obviously, when there is default constructor is not there, no argument constructor is not there, and there is only parameterized constructor. Now if you are trying to create an object like this, it is basically giving an error. So what it says, it is expecting two arguments but found zero. So you explicitly have only this parameterized constructor defined, so you need to pass on parameters. That is what it is done here. Employee E2. So if you see here, I have passed the parameters, two parameters, employee ID and salary. So this constructor will be a suitable match and this constructor will be called. Okay, let's just run it once. Okay, so main method starts, you are creating an object with parameterized constructor with employee ID and salary. So employee ID is this, salary is this. It is printing employee ID, salary, and main method ends. Okay, it is saying main method ends. Now there can be a tricky question: what is a private constructor? So public, private, protected, default, these are the access modifiers used, and we have a separate discussion on that in the subsequent sessions. So private constructor is something which cannot be invoked by some other class. Okay, for now it is this much definition is sufficient. uh, Private constructor is basically you cannot, it cannot be called by some other class. So you are protecting the creation of object of your class into other class. Okay, so this is slightly inheritance related concept also, where in inheritance what you can do is you can create an object of the parent class in the child class. But when you have a private constructor in the parent class, then you cannot create an object of the parent class inside the child class. This is basically using private constructor. Okay, now another interesting topic called as this keyword. So what is this keyword? Let's see with an example first. Okay, so I have this class called as student1, and it has a couple of variables. And now if you see, I have a parameterized constructor. Okay, uh, now as usual I am creating an object of the student class, and I am passing those 5 parameters. So when I call, so this will automatically invoke the parameterized constructor, and it is assigning the values here. Okay, whatever values I have assigned, that will be assigned. uh, Whatever values I have passed, that will be assigned. Now let's just print the student ID and standard first, and let's see what is happening. Okay, so main method starts creating an object and calling the parameters constructor, and I'm printing the student ID and standard. So student ID and standard is, the value is set to null, and main method ends. Now what has happened here? Okay, what has happened here? So here basically whatever variables I have passed here as an argument, that is basically assigned to itself. Okay, that is basically assigned to itself. Division. But my intention here is whatever student ID I have passed as an argument should be assigned to the student ID. Whatever standard, division, and other variables I have assigned, I want that to be assigned to these instance variable. So this is not happening. So basically this is not a useful approach to having duplicate variable name. So one way to overcome this is basically you change the variable name. Okay, so student ID is there, you say student ID new, standard you say standard new, division new, or some different naming. So in that way it is easy to assign the values. Now that is a very good coding practice, but for certain circumstances or because of some business rules, it may not be possible to write the code in that way. So how to overcome this is basically using the this keyword. Okay, now you see everything is same, but I have used a keyword called as this keyword. So this dot, so though the variable name is same, student id, whenever I am doing this statement, this dot student id equal to student id. So what I mean by this is, when I say this dot something, I am referring to a variable or a method which belongs to the current class. Once again, whenever I am saying this dot something, that means I am referring the variable which belongs to the current class and not the local variable. So this way, even if the variable names are exactly same, I am able to change or assign the value of a duplicate same named variable to the instance variable. This is possible using this keyword. Okay, so now I'm printing student ID and standard. Let's just run it and see whether the student ID and standard is printed as null or not. Okay, so if you see here, student ID is maths 001 and marks or standard is 5. Main method start, main method end. So in this way, using similar or same variable name, I can still use the instance variable with the keyword called as this. Okay, so it is used to refer to current class item, be it a variable or a method or revisiting constructor. So let's see with an example. So I have this school class and I have this student class. So in the school class, I have a method called as attend lecture, and also I have attend lecture method in the student3 class also. Now this is in inheritance also. So in when I inherit whatever is there in the school class into the student3 class, that means I can call the attend lecture method. Okay, but now here there can be a confusion that whenever I call uh, let's say I have created an object of student, and yeah, main method. So I have created object of student3. Now whenever I'm calling this begin, in the begin statement, if I use, let's say, attend lecture, that means which attend lecture method should be invoked, whether it is from student3 or school class. So whenever you want to explicitly call or refer to a method or a variable which belongs to the current class. Now, what is the current class here? Student3 is the current class. So if you want to explicitly call the method which is belong to the current class, you say this dot attend lecture. So that means the method which is in the current class, that will be invoked and that will be called, rather than the one which is in the parent. Why? Because you have extended it. Okay, so let us see. So student new student3 s dot begin. So I'm calling one method here, and from this method I'm calling current class method using this. Okay, so main method starts, I'm calling a constructor. Okay, s dot begin. So I'm coming here and I'm calling this dot attend lecture. So the method which is in the current class, that will be called. So it is saying attend lecture, and main method ends. Okay, now this one. So revisiting constructor, this method. Okay, so this is a slightly advanced concept called as constructor overloading, or also method overloading type also. So also we will be learning what is constructor chaining using this keyword. So overloading, overriding, we have a separate discussion. Please refer to the other sections. Now just a small thing here. So I have a class called as student maths, and now I am creating an object of the student maths class, right? Very simple. So I am passing 5 arguments. Now, as I said, we can have multiple constructor. So what is happening here is whenever a constructor with 5 arguments is invoked, the JVM will look after a matching constructor. So now if you see at line number 27, the constructor is defined is having 5 variables. So the line number 27 constructor will be called first. Now if you see from this constructor, from this constructor only deals with address and hobby variable. For example, now for student ID, standard and division, it is referring those to another constructor. Another constructor. Why another constructor? Because I am using this keyword. So using this keyword, you can invoke other constructor as well. That is possible using this keyword. So if you see here, using this keyword, I have called a constructor which takes 3 parameters. So luckily there's a constructor which takes 3 parameters. Okay, but unfortunately this 3 parameter constructor deals with division, standard and division variable, but not with the student ID. So with student ID, I have to use another constructor which takes only 1 argument. So this is the one, right? So this is dealing with student ID, this is dealing with other 2 variable, and this with other 2 variable. So this calling a constructor from another constructor and calling constructor again from another constructor, this is basically called as constructor chaining. And it can be done using this keyword. So this keyword can also be used to refer to constructor also, which is in the current class. Okay, and now there's an empty constructor here, no argument constructor, no body constructor. Okay, so the sequence of this execution will be main method starts, and constructor, an object will be created, and a constructor which takes 5 parameters will be called. Okay, so it has come here. Now the first line is, it is calling a constructor which takes 3 lines. Here it takes the same thing, and it is calling a constructor with 1 line, 1 argument. So it will come here, so it will assign the student ID. So it will say constructor 1 ends, then this is finished, then assignment, then constructor 2 ends, then assignments, then constructor 3 ends. Okay, and that's how it will go. This is called a constructor chaining concept, also sometimes called as constructor overloading also. So overloading, very in short, overloading means you can have the same method name but different set of arguments. We'll have another discussion on this anyway. Let's just run it and see. Okay, main method starts, constructor 1 ends, 2 ends, 3 ends, and main method ends. Okay, very simple, straightforward to understand. Now let another relevant topic is super keyword. So it is used to refer to immediate parent class item, be it a variable, method, or revisiting constructor. So this is basically between parent and child. Let's see what the super keyword means here. Super keyword. Okay, so I have a student class, and I have a school class and student class. Okay, so school class has an attribute, school class has a constructor. Let's say it is a no argument constructor and non-empty body constructor, and it has a public method. Okay, now I have a student class which extends school class. So student extends school. Now in the student class, I have a constructor which is basically for student class. Okay, and now I have a method called as attend lecture, and I have a method called as begin. Now let's see what is happening here. Now I am creating an object of the student class. If you see right hand side, I am creating an object of the student class. So the moment I create an object of the student class, the constructor will be called, and whenever I have used this super keyword, so this is basically kind of opposite to this keyword. In this keyword, it is basically referring to something which is in the current class. Whereas when I use super keyword, that means I want to refer to a variable which is in the parent class, which is in the immediate parent class. So whenever I'm using a super add up this syntax, that means I want to call the constructor of the parent class. Okay, so calling parent class constructor. Okay, one more point to note here is whenever you are using, you're calling a constructor of parent or calling another constructor from current constructor, it has to be the first line. Okay, it has to be the first line in the constructor. Same thing applies to here. Okay, here if you see, I am calling another constructor from current constructor, so that is possible using this keyword, but it should be the first line in the constructor. Let's just see, I am removing this and I'm adding it here. So this is not allowed. Whenever I'm invoking another constructor from my constructor using this keyword, it should be the first statement. It is saying call to this must be the first statement in the constructor body. So that is why you should have it at the first line. This is also first line. Similar thing for super also. Super here is used to call the constructor from the parent class. Okay, so the rule is it should be the first statement in the constructor. Let's just try this. I'm putting it here. So it is giving an compilation error. It what it is saying, it must be the first statement in the constructor body. Okay, so let me just go back. Right, so it should be the first statement. Now I'm creating an object of the student class, so I'm calling a constructor anyway, which is calling a parent class constructor, and it will go and it will call the parent class constructor. Yeah, let's just comment this first, and let's just run it first. Main method starts inside constructor school, inside constructor student. So it is coming here, it is calling the parent class constructor. So it is going to this, it is saying inside constructor school. Okay, and then once this is finished, it is saying inside the constructor of student, and main method ends. Now let us see these other things also. I am calling a method called as begin. When I say begin, okay, now here in this case I am calling the using this keyword I am calling the method from the current class. So we have seen this in earlier example also. Using this keyword you can call the method which is in the current class. So if you see, current class method is this one, attend lecture. So it is saying attend lecture student. Now this is just another statement. And now if you see, I want to call attend lecture method from the parent class. This can be done using super keyword. Now you may ask that uh, here what I said is using super keyword, if I want to use, it should be the first line. That is correct if you are using, if you are dealing with a constructor. Now this is not a constructor. Super dot attend lecture is not a constructor, is another method. Okay, just another normal method. So it may not be at the first line, it can be at some other lines as well. Okay, now I'm saying this dot name. So by name, when I say this dot name, I am referring to the name variable which is in the current class. Whereas if I'm saying super dot name, that means I am referring to something which is in the parent class, this one. Okay, so let's just run it once. Okay, so this we know already, inside constructor school, inside constructor student, attend lecture student. Okay, so now first it is calling begin method. In the begin method, I am calling a method called as this dot attend lecture. So it is referring to the current class. So it will saying attend lecture student. So attend lecture student, and here I am saying attend lecture, which is from the parent class. So I am saying here it will print attend lecture school, and now I'm referring to the current class variable using this. So xyz school, so xyz school, and when I say super dot name, that means it is abc school. Okay, abc school is coming from parent class. Okay, so this is about super keyword, this keyword, with examples. So let's continue the topics in the subsequent sessions. Thank you.